You are listening to KZSC's Voces, Críticas, Critical Voices. I am your producer and host, Silvana Falcone. Today I'm here with Dr. Mary Thomas. Dr. Thomas is the research associate for the Eloise Pickard Smith Gallery here at UC Santa Cruz. In June 2017, she earned her PhD in visual studies from UC Santa Cruz. Dr. Thomas is also the Associate Director of Development for the U.S. Latinx Art Forum, an advocacy organization dedicated to expanding and enhancing the visibility of U.S. Latinx art within academia, exhibition spaces, private and institutional collections, and archival initiatives. I've invited her on the show to talk about an art exhibit opening on campus today called Emerging Visions, Creative Practice at the Nexus of Freedom and Justice. She worked with 12 artists and independent presses to bring Emerging Visions to campus. Emerging Visions draws upon her expertise as a specialist in Latinx and African American art history and represents an expansion of her research, which uses theories of improvisation to explore how artists participate in struggles for spatial justice. Welcome back, Mary, to KZSC's Voces Críticas.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was just telling you, it's your one-year anniversary on the show, so it's great to have you back.
It's wonderful to be back.
So tell us, how did Emerging Visions come together, and maybe give us a little bit of a preview about who some of the artists featured in this exhibit?
So Emerging Visions has come together kind of gradually over the course of the last 9 months, with the majority of the action and work taking place starting around this January 2018. The artists that are featured in the show include artists who are both local to Santa Cruz. So we have artists such as Felicia Rice and Moving Parts Press featured in the show, as well as 2 students that are currently at UCSC and creating work, Alma Villaloma and Zoe Sandoval. But we also feature artists from throughout California. So we have several independent presses from the Bay Area, such as Floss Editions and Tiny Splendor Press. Tiny Splendor is actually founded by UCSC alumni, and an artist from Oakland named Layla Weafer. We have artists who are actually beyond California as well, where Natasha Ogunji is an artist who's based out of Austin, Texas and Lagos, Nigeria. And then our other artist who's from outside of California but calls herself adopted native of California is Kara Salmon. Some of the work that's featured in the show, it ranges. So we have print work, we have letterpress prints. Layla's series of letterpress prints called the Blackberry Lexicon were actually made using blackberry juice as well. So it's an interesting use of this very pulpy kind of organic material against this very crisp presentation of letters on paper. We have performance work as well that will be featured in the show, silkscreen posters, and we're also going to have 2 interactive pieces, one of which is a game and the other is an interactive cabinet of curiosities.
Well, I'm curious. I'm excited to see this now that it's opened. So tell us, how do you come and collaborate with 12 artists?
It's a really interesting and an unpredictable process in a lot of ways. These collaborations started by working with some of my existing connections and relationships. So one of the organizations that's featured in the show is Self-Help Graphics from Los Angeles. I had worked with them previously on a catalog, and so I had heard that they were interested in showing some of their print archive, just, having it circulate and be on display. From there, I used this as an opportunity to really put my ear to the ground and pay close attention to what artists were doing, not only here in our local community, on our campus, but also looking to the Bay Area as well and trying to find interesting, we might call them emerging artists or, early to mid-career artists who are working in kind of unconventional or interesting ways. And I found that when I spoke with one artist, they would often say, oh, well, I have a friend who is also doing this and, let me put you in touch with them. So it was both serendipitous and had this kind of organic evolution as well.
Was that an intentional selection choice?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say the one exception is Felicia Rice and Moving Parts Press. They're a local institution, more or less. But what's exciting about the work that Felicia will have in the show is that it's a new project that will be making its first debut.
So the art exhibit is called Emerging Visions, Creative Practice at the Nexus of Freedom and Justice. Can you give us some insight into how that thematic kind of emerged in the planning process and share with us some challenges that come along with planning and working with 12 artists and presses for an exhibit like this?
So the idea for the show is really inspired by a book by a woman named Adrienne Marie Brown. She's a social justice facilitator who's based out of Detroit. In the book that she wrote called Emergent Strategy, she talks about the need to build movements that are a mile wide rather than an inch wide and a mile deep. And so it's thinking about a spirit of inclusivity. It's thinking about kind of horizontality, inclusivity, and paying attention to things that take place almost on kind of the everyday, the small scale level that have these radical implications for how we look at the world and how we can envision change taking place. So that's a lot to try to fit into one exhibition. And so one of the challenges is always this moment where you encounter the work, viewing it on the artist's website, and you get a picture of what the show might look like through these images that you're working with. It's a very different experience when the work appears in the gallery and all of a sudden, it's very clear these are real objects that need certain kinds of care and certain kinds of attention. And sometimes they're a little unruly, so sometimes things don't attach to the wall in the way you might expect, or the chords don't line up in the way you might think. So the process of installing the show itself is one that is really a collective effort, not only on the part of the person organizing it, but on the artists. And I would say there's a lot of trust required on both parties. And that's something that I work really hard to cultivate and facilitate, to make sure that the artists know how their work will be displayed and have a sense of how it will fit within the larger show.
I wanted to sort of pick up on this point you just made around trust. How do you cultivate that kind of trust?
So with many of the artists that are in the show, I contacted them about the show, and that was the first time we had ever been in conversation. And in a couple of different capacities, I sent them an email with a description of the show and said, I've looked at your work, and this particular piece sounds exciting to me. And I was shocked by how many positive responses I received. People said, this resonates with what I'm thinking about right now, and yes, let's think about how we can make this work. I always offered the option that if the artist had other work that they thought might fit better, that I would always have that conversation with them about what they thought would be the best fit for the show. In all cases, I try to be as transparent as possible. I tell the artists that this is a gallery that really runs on a minimal budget. I am the only employee who is dedicated to the gallery, and we have an all intern staff who assist with installation. So being very clear and transparent about, we don't have professional installers who will be handling your work, but I can assure you that we will handle your work with the utmost care and respect. So I think that transparency goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree. And as researchers, we know that transparency can make or break the relationships we create in our work. One of the things I also wanted to talk to you was about your other hat, which is Associate Director of Development for the U.S. Latinx Art Forum. Tell us about this organization.
So the U.S. Latinx Art Forum, or USLAF, as we very fondly call it, was established in 2015, and it emerged from two panels at the College Art Association conference that were addressing the lack of representation of Latinx art within art history as a discipline. At that time, you could count on, I think, one hand the number of faculty in art history departments who were specialists in this field, and there were maybe at most 8 graduate students working in this topic within art history departments. And from the conversations that took place in those panels, USLAF formed as an organization. If you look at the roster from those panels, the executive committee pretty closely aligns with, who is there. And since USLAF was founded, there have been a number of really incredible accomplishments that this organization has managed to achieve, one of which is we received affiliated society status at the College Art Association, and this grants us a panel at each conference every single year. So this now means Latinx art has guaranteed representation at the conference.
And is it an annual conference?
It is an annual conference.
And where is it held throughout the country? Or tell us a little bit more about that space.
So it tends to vary and move between cities. So frequently it's held in New York. It was most recently held in Los Angeles. And the most recent iteration of the conference was actually a good year for Latinx art, since there were a lot of panels addressing the Getty's Pacific Standard Time, Los Angeles by Latin America initiative. That was kind of an unusual year, though. I I spearheaded a study with a colleague of mine, Rose Salceda, who's currently finishing her dissertation. And I think it was in 2016, we actually went year by year from the conference programs to count how many panels, how many papers were dedicated to Latinx art. And we found that was less than 1% in many cases. And we actually compared it to conferences like the American Studies Association or the Latino Studies Association, just to see where these conversations were taking place. And we found that the College Art Association was lagging behind, where ideally they should be one of the organizations that's leading or at least participating strongly in these conversations. That study was actually kind of the starting point for beginning a relationship with the College Art Association and beginning to partner, collaborate, and start a conversation with them about these issues. So they were very responsive to the outcome of the study, and they've been really strong partners for USLAF in helping us to not only access the College Art Association as a platform, but working with us to think about inclusivity in other ways as well.
Can you tell people where they could get more information about USLAF?
So USLAF has a website, and it's uslaf.org. We're also very active on social media. I would say Facebook has the most consistent range of postings, opportunities, calls for participation. It's also free to become a member right now. And so I encourage anyone who's interested to join because it does provide access to annual newsletters, calls for participation for both upcoming conferences and USLAF events as well.
You're listening to Dr. Mary Thomas, Research Associate for the Eloise Pickard Smith Gallery here at UC Santa Cruz. She's also the Associate Director of Development for the U.S. Latinx Art Forum, an advocacy organization dedicated to expanding and enhancing the visibility of U.S. Latinx art within academia, exhibition spaces, private and institutional collections, and archival initiatives. Dr. Thomas worked with 12 artists and independent presses to bring to campus Emerging Visions. The exhibit opens today, April 19th, and it will run through June 19th. So the description of the Emerging Visions exhibit states that, quote, it features artists who expand how freedom can be enacted by embedding that which is spectacular and radical into everyday life, end quote. What is meant by the spectacular and the radical here as it relates to everyday life?
So one piece that I think offers a really great glimpse into how we can think of the spectacular and the radical in everyday life is a performance by Wara Natasha Ogunji called You Fly. And this is a performance that took place at a series of BART stations in San Francisco. She worked with a small group of performers. They were dressed all in black, and they had kind of these handmade costumes. They had gas canisters that were filled with water that hung from their arms, and then they had these silver hoods that they placed over their head. And the performers moved through the city in a loose formation, but you needed to kind of mimic the movements of the person in front of you. So in thinking about this performance, it's an ever-evolving and ever-shifting series of movements. But when we're also thinking about, it was a group of women moving through the city in this kind of formation. They have these heavy canisters on their arms. It's restricting their movement, kind of creating this bodily containment as they're kind of working against it. And we're also thinking about San Francisco as a particularly politically fraught site where there's issues of gentrification, BART stations particularly as sites where people of color have been subject to violence by police officers. So thinking about this performance as an intervention into the everyday, but there are these elements of it that move it into this realm of almost the unreal. So that performance is one way that we can think of art as maybe puncturing everyday life and asking us to maybe take a step back and think, but what else is possible here?
To me, that is such a generative kind of moment. Those kinds of things stay with you.
You know, a really key word both with that piece and with this exhibition is generative, right? That there's something that can grow and expand. This exhibition is maybe a seed for a set of larger conversations we can have.
Oh, Mary, we need lots of conversations right now, don't you think?
Absolutely.
So as a art and visual culture expert, why is this exhibit, Emerging Visions, so meaningful to you?
There are a lot of things that I could say. This is actually the first exhibition that I've overseen related to my own research, and so it has a lot of personal meaning to me. And some of the works in this show thinking about it in a personal way right now, but there are 2 prints in the show from Self-Help Graphics that I saw for the first time 10 years ago in an exhibition called Phantom Sightings, Art After the Chicano Movement. One of them is called The Crystal Brilliance Manifesto, and it's about how we can think of public art in new capacities. The other is a piece by Shizu Saldamando, and it's a print that looks like her notes that are just written on a crumpled up piece of notebook paper. And there are sketches and, comments about how do we rework the images we've been given, but, there's also a drawing of her doing her eyeliner on there. And so these pieces actually were the things that I saw at a critical moment in my intellectual life that inspired me to go on and get a PhD. So there's an element of this coming full circle. But beyond that, it's particularly meaningful because we're seeing the gallery, the Smith Gallery, activated in, I think, a new way. We have a really incredible suite of work that's expansive in its range, but it'll also be a space that I'm hoping students will feel that they have access to in a new way. I'm actually installing a zine library in the gallery for this exhibition, so we'll have zines on display in the show, but there will be zines that you can just pick up and leaf through while you're walking through the show as well. For me, in many ways, it's an experiment in terms of what the gallery can hold thematically. We have work that both has this kind of optimistic and resilient tone, but we also have work that is thematically heavy. And I think that in this particular moment, holding both a spirit of resilience while also sitting with the very real and very difficult topics and issues that we're seeing come up day after day, I'm hoping that this will not only resonate, but offer maybe kind of a restorative and thought-provoking place for students and the community at large.
Oh, I love that core title of Emerging Visions because I feel very much in need of those emerging visions as I try and make sense of what's happening around us. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for coming on to talk about this exhibit, Emerging Visions, opening now until June 19th. I wondered if you had any final comments that you would like to share.
I just want to end by thanking the incredible team of student interns that I work with. Many of them are artists who are graduating themselves, and so it's a pleasure to not only work with them, but to see them not only apply their knowledge, but expand it as well. And talking with them about the work and getting their insights and reactions is one of the greatest parts of working on this exhibition. So many thanks to them and for their energy and brilliance that they bring each day.
So, Mary, can you tell us when the public can come view the exhibit?
The gallery is open Tuesday through Saturday from 12 to 5 p.m.
Tuesday through Saturday, 12 to 5 p.m., free and open to the public. Come see Emerging Visions, Creative Practice at the Nexus of Freedom and Justice here at the Eloise Pickard Smith Gallery. Open now through June 19th. Thanks again, Mary, for coming on.
Thank you so much.